main season that everyone thinks about in Adelaide is it's hot and dry. Certainly through February, the temperatures skyrocket well above 40 degrees, even here at Parapol near the sea. So during the summer months, as things dry out, you tend to get those big dust storms that come through. If you have a front coming through, the forecast may indicate localised raised dust, and that can reduce visibility reasonably quickly.
The dust can be widespread, it can be persistent, it can last for several hours or even up to half a day, and can blanket out quite a large area.
From time to time in summertime we get a frontal system that comes through, and if there's sufficient low level moisture following that frontal system, we do get some low cloud along the coastal regions, particularly the southern ends of Kangaroo Island, the western parts of the state from west of Ceduna and the far lower southeast coastal areas. But that low cloud, because of the warmth of the land and the amount of incoming radiation during the day, tends not to last too long of the day. It burns off quite quickly and generally doesn't extend very far inland.
When we've got a high pressure and the wind is coming from the sea, it's quite often we get very low stratus and strato Q that hang around the coast and a couple of 100 miles inland and can be persistent for days, even weeks on end.
So now we're levelling off at top of Clyde. We're looking towards the hills, and we can just start to make out Boulevard Strobe in the distance, which is a good marker to say that we are heading towards South Parra Reservoir. And you can already starting to make your mind up about weather conditions. On a day like today, we can see the cloud is actually well and truly clear of the mountains. But what we're looking for as we look ahead as to whether or not there are any layers of cloud that come down and look as if they touch the horizon. Anything you see in front of you that comes down and touches the horizon really means it's at your level. So if you maintain this height up to the point where the cloud is, then you're going to enter the cloud. Looking out to the right, you can see in the distance, that's the lofty range, the Mount Lofty Towers. We can see that there's no cloud anywhere near the tops of the hills. So at this stage, at least on this side of the hills, it's quite good VFR flying conditions.
We can get lee turbulence, lee side of the Mount Lofty Ranges or the Victorian side of the Mount Lofty Ranges, and that can extend for 100, even up to 150 nautical miles in the lee of the Mount Lofty Ranges. And it's quite common with a very fast moving front to even get tornado activity and waterspouts over the sea.
Although our mountains in South Australia, some would say they're not mountains, they're just high ground, but there is sufficient lift goes on over that high ground to form low cloud, in particular along the Mount Lofty Ranges immediately east of Adelaide, and in the southern parts of the Flinders Ranges, which extend northwards from the Mount Lofty Ranges.
May not be in our immediate flight path, but that low cloud would be moving back towards South Parra Reservoir. So in an hour's time, if we're planning to head back via South Parra Reservoir, there's low cloud in that area, it would be moving in the direction of South Parra. This is a good direction to go because the ground's actually falling away from us. We're actually flying in towards the lower ground level. So generally speaking, once you get through this high terrain and seeing it's clear, generally the flying's going to be reasonably straightforward from this point on. Murray Bridge ALA is an airstrip that our company uses quite often, not just for circuit training, but coming back in towards Parafield and Adelaide. If the weather is getting low over the hills, rather than continuing into poor weather, we come back and land here at Murray Bridge because it's not that far away. It's a good all-weather strip. It is a gravel strip, but it's been prepared and rolled. So even if it pours with rain in this area, you can still land and taxi on the hard stands without fear of getting bogged. So it's a very good alternate airfield for those that are travelling towards Parafield or indeed Adelaide.
In Adelaide, the katabatic winds are called, we call them the gully winds, and often they're referred to gully winds on the forecasts that you hear on the radio and you see on the TV. It's a very Adelaidean term. You'll find gully winds, especially very strong in summer, on both sides of the Mount Lofty Ranges. You'll get them on the Parafield side, but you'll also get them on the Murray Bridge side of the Adelaide Hills.
The next leg that we're going to fly, going from Salute across to South Parra Reservoir, has a magnetic track of 300 degrees. And we do have a couple of choices. One, if the weather's looking quite dark all the way around in front of us and it looks quite dark and the cloud base is getting low over the hills, towards the South Para Reservoir, it might be another good decision to go back and increase our stay at Murray Bridge and just wait for the weather to lift a little bit higher. Or if it looks like there's just a few rain showers in this area, but generally speaking all the reports are that the cloud base is 2,500 feet and it's quite clear at Parafield. And to the north it looks quite clear. We can extend our flight path to the north and track towards the NDB of Stonefield. You can see we're just skirting the high terrain. When we get to Stonefield, the plan from there will be to follow the Sturt Highway down to Truro and then to come back down to South Para Reservoir. What we do by this nav route is we just bypass this little bit of high terrain here that we've got to otherwise fly over. So just on this little nav route that we're flying from Murray Bridge up to Stonefield, there's 1, 2, 3 little airfields that generally they need prior permission if you are planning to use them, but again if the weather is turning sour, they're available for use in an emergency if you start getting caught out. You can see generally as we're going in this direction out in this area, the high terrain is generally coming down, and if we look further to the north, you can see the hills are starting to really flatten out. That's why coming further north to get into Parafield is advisable route when the weather does get a little bit lower. You can see the high ground, but you can also now start to see the Barossa Valley, and it's generally lower ground, so this is good. We're flying from, yes, we're low over some high terrain, but the train is generally starting to fall away from us. But before we commit ourselves to turning and heading in that direction, I'm having a good look in that area to make sure that it does actually look clear. If it looks fairly dark and I can't see too far in that direction, again, I wouldn't continue into a worsening case of weather, dark cloud, rain showers. If there was fog in this area over the Barossa Valley, I'd be starting to suspect fog in the Parafield area as well. You can see here, heading in this direction, it's actually reasonably clear and it's looking fine to continue in this direction. However, definitely wouldn't want to be any lower than this. If I found myself being forced lower and lower due to a lowering cloud base, I wouldn't continue. Heading back towards South Para Reservoir, the aeronautical beacon's giving us a good reference point as to where the South Para Reservoir is. So what we're doing now is we're just following up this valley, being sure not to fly too low over build-up areas and avoiding build-up areas wherever we can if we are low. But you can see here that we've got a nice corridor at the foothills heading up towards South Para. The only problem being, when we do come around the corner here, you may be faced with a lot of clouds sitting on this side of the ranges that you may not have seen until you got up to the Truro area. Again, if we've got southwesterly breezes coming off the Vincent Gulf, the cloud generally will start to pile up against the hills here. So it may not be passable. Again, in overcast conditions, you need to give yourself more of a margin of error with your arrival times with respects to last light conditions. And South Para in the distance.